Princess Yuna stood alone on the observation deck of her father's flagship. Through the massive windows, she watched the stars burn. But these were not real stars. They were ships. Her father's ships. The pride of the Arendar Empire was dying in the cold darkness of space. She pressed her silver hand against the glass. Her skin was pale like moonlight, and her eyes were the color of deep purple storms. She was beautiful by any standard in the galaxy, but right now, beauty meant nothing. Right now, she was watching her world fall apart. The human fleet had come without warning. For 300 years, the Arendar Empire had ruled the Outer Rim. They had conquered dozens of planets. They had built stations that floated like cities among the stars. They had believed themselves to be the greatest power in the known universe. They were wrong. The tactical display behind Yuna flickered with red warnings. Ship after ship disappeared from the screen. Each disappearance meant thousands of Arendarian soldiers dead. Each flash of light outside the window was a funeral pyre for warriors who would never go home. How is this possible? She whispered to herself. Her people had better technology. They had more ships. They had centuries of military experience. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be nothing more than laborers and slaves. That was what she had been taught since childhood. But the humans fought, like demons possessed. Their ships moved in patterns that made no sense. They sacrificed their own vessels to create openings in the Arendarian formation. They used the debris of destroyed ships as weapons, sending the broken metal crashing into her father's cruisers. They turned every Arendarian tactic back against its creators. The door behind Yuna opened. Her advisor, an old Arendarian named Lord Taiho, walked in. His face was gray with fear. "Princess, you must go to the escape pods," he said. "The flagship shields are failing. Who commands them?" Yuna asked. She did not turn from the window. "Who leads the human fleet?" Lord Taiho hesitated. "They call him the Ghost of Titan, a human male. His name is Admiral Park Doan." Yuna searched her memory. The name meant nothing to her. Just another human name, simple and short. But this simple human was destroying everything she knew. "He has killed more of our warriors in 6 hours than we lost in the entire border war," Lord Taiho continued. "Princess, please. We must leave." Before Yuna could answer, the ship shook violently. The lights flickered and turned red. Alarms began to scream throughout the corridors. Through the window, she saw a human boarding ship attach itself to the flagship's hull like a parasite. They were being boarded. Yuna finally turned from the window. "Take me to my father." They ran through the corridors of the dying ship. Smoke filled the air. Wounded soldiers lay against the walls, their purple blood pooling on the metal floor. Some of them reached out to Yuna as she passed, but she could not stop. She could not help them. The throne room of the flagship was a massive chamber filled with golden pillars and holographic displays. Emperor Kunho sat on his throne, surrounded by his generals and his sons. Yuna's 3 brothers stood with their weapons drawn, ready to fight. But there was no fight left. The main doors exploded inward. Arendarian guards flew through the air like toys. And through the smoke walked the humans. They moved in perfect formation, their black armor making them look like shadows given form. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. They did not speak. They did not threaten. They simply took control of the room with cold efficiency, and at their head walked a single man. He was taller than the other humans, but not by much. His armor was different from the rest. It was scarred and dented, showing years of battle. His helmet covered his entire face, hiding everything but the faint glow of his visor. He walked toward the throne as if he owned it already. Yuna's eldest brother, Prince Junho, raised his sword. "You dare approach the Emperor? I will cut you down where you stand." The armored man did not slow. He did not even look at the prince. He simply raised one hand and the soldiers behind him moved. In less than a second, Prince Junho was on the ground, his sword taken, his arms locked behind his back. "I am not here for your pride," the man said. His voice came through his helmet, cold and mechanical. "I am here for your surrender." Emperor Kyunho rose from his throne. He was old, his silver hair falling past his shoulders, but his eyes still burned with anger. "You think you have won, human? This is one battle. We had 1,000 ships. We have 1,000,000 soldiers. We will crush you." "You had 1,000 ships," the man corrected. "Now you have 112. Your 1,000,000 soldiers are scattered across the sector, cut off from command, waiting for orders that will never come." He stopped at the base of the throne. "Your empire is over. Accept it." Yuna watched this human with growing confusion. He did not gloat. He did not laugh at their defeat. He spoke like a doctor delivering bad news. There was no joy in his voice, only tired certainty. "What are your terms?" The question came from Yuna's mouth before she could stop it. Every head in the room turned to her. Her father's eyes burned with shame that his daughter would speak before him. Her brother stared at her with anger. But the armored man, he went still, completely still. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he turned to face her. His visor seemed to study her, though she could not see his eyes behind the dark glass. "The terms are simple," he finally said. His voice had changed. It was softer now, though still filtered through the helmet. "And the slave markets. Free all human prisoners. Demilitarize the Kepler corridor. In exchange, your people live. Your culture survives. Your royal family remains in power." "That is merciful," Yuna said. "That is practical," the man replied. "I did not come here for revenge. I came here to end the war." He turned back to the emperor. But Yuna had seen something. When the man had looked at her, his hand had trembled. Just slightly. Just for a moment. As if seeing her had caused him pain. She did not understand why. Not yet. Emperor Kyunho looked at his ruined throne room. He looked at his captured sons. He looked at the human soldiers standing like statues with their weapons ready. And finally, he looked at the honored man who had brought his empire to its knees. "I accept your terms," the emperor said. Each word seemed to cost him years of his life. The man nodded once. Then he turned and walked toward the doors. His soldiers followed, bringing the captured princes with them. But at the doorway, he stopped. He looked back over his shoulder at Yuna. She could not see his face. She could not read his expression. But she felt something in that look. Something familiar. Something she had forgotten long ago. Then he was gone. And Yuna was left standing in the ruins of her father's power, wondering why a human conqueror had looked at her like she was a ghost from his past. 3 weeks passed after the surrender. The Imperial Palace on Arender Prime had never felt so empty. The halls that once echoed with the sounds of celebration now carried only whispers. Servants moved like ghosts, afraid to make noise. Guards stood at their posts with hollow eyes, their pride broken along with their fleet. Yuna spent those weeks in silence. She walked through the gardens her mother had planted before her death. She sat in the library and pretended to read. She attended the small council meetings where her father said nothing and her brothers plotted. Revenge that would never come. But mostly, she thought about the armored man. Something about him would not leave her mind. The way he had moved. The way he had spoken. The way his hand had trembled when he looked at her. It was like a song she had heard long ago. The melody familiar but the words forgotten. On the 21st day, the human delegation arrived to finalize the peace treaty. Yuna stood behind the ceremonial screens in the throne room, hidden from view. This was the traditional place for royal women during important meetings. She was meant to observe, but not participate. It was an old custom, one she had always hated. The doors opened, and the humans entered. There were 6 of them. 5 wore the formal uniforms of diplomats, their clothes clean and pressed. But the 6th man wore simple military dress. A plain gray jacket, black pants, boots that had seen years of use. No medals, no decorations. Nothing to show his rank. This was Admiral Park Do-hwan, the ghost of Titan. He had removed his armor. Without it, he looked almost ordinary. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and a straight back. His hair was dark, but silver touched his temples. His skin was weathered by years of space travel, and his eyes carried a weight that seemed too heavy for one man. Yuna studied his face through the gaps in the screen. She searched for something, though she did not know what. And then she found it. A scar. It ran from his left eyebrow down to his cheekbone. It was thin and pale, almost invisible unless you knew to look. An old wound, healed long ago, but never truly gone. Yuna's heart stopped. She had seen that wound before. She had seen it made 30 years ago on a forgotten mining colony at the edge of Arendorian space. A young princess had been sent away during a political crisis. The colony was supposed to be safe. It was supposed to be hidden. But it was also a place where human laborers worked in the deep mines, digging for precious metals. Yuna had been 12 years old. Small for an Arendorian. Scared and alone in a strange place. The human workers were forbidden from speaking to her. But one boy did not follow the rules. He was thin and dirty, with dark hair and quick eyes. He was 14, only a little older than her, but he seemed so much more grown up. He worked in the maintenance tunnels, fixing machines that were older than both of them combined. His name was Do-hwan. Just Do-hwan. A laborer's son with no family name worth remembering. He had found her crying in the cargo bay on her first night. Instead of running away, he sat down beside her. He did not speak her language, and she did not speak his. But somehow, they understood each other. Over the following months, they became friends. He taught her human words. She taught him Arendorian poetry. They would meet in the maintenance tunnels after dark, sharing stolen food and whispered dreams. Then came the accident. A piece of heavy machinery had come loose from the ceiling. It was falling straight toward Yuna. She did not even have time to scream. But Do-hwan was faster. He pushed her out of the way and took the blow himself. The metal tore across his face, cutting from his eyebrow to his cheek. Blood poured down his skin, red and shocking. Yuna had never seen so much blood. She thought he was going to die, but she was a princess, and she had access to things other children did not. She had stolen a healing device from her guardian's room. It was forbidden technology, meant only for Arendorian royalty. Using it on a human was a crime. She did not care. She healed him in that dark tunnel, crying the whole time. And when the wound closed, leaving only a thin scar, he looked at her with those quick eyes and said the first Arendorian word he had ever learned. Friend. 1 month later, the colony was attacked by raiders. Yuna was evacuated back to the homeworld. When she asked about the human workers, she was told they had all been killed. She had mourned for Do-hwan in secret. She had never forgotten his face. But 30 years was a long time. Memory faded. Life continued. And the boy who had bled for her became a ghost. A story she told herself on lonely nights. Now that ghost stood in her father's throne room. Yuna gripped the ceremonial screen so hard that the wood cracked under her fingers. Her breathing became fast and shallow. Her purple eyes were wide with shock. It was him. It was really him. The boy who had saved her life had grown into the man who had conquered her empire. The human confederacy demands the following, Do-hwan said. His voice was calm and professional. First, the complete dissolution of all slave markets within Arendorian territory. Second, the immediate release of all human prisoners taken during the border wars. Third, the permanent demilitarization of the Kepler Corridor. Emperor Kunho sat on his throne like a statue. His face showed nothing, but Yuna knew her father. He was burning with humiliation. "These demands are unacceptable," Prince Junho said. He stood at the emperor's right hand, his eyes filled with hatred. "You have won one battle. You cannot dictate terms as if you have won the war." Dowan looked at the prince with tired patience. "I have won the war. Your fleet is destroyed. Your supply lines are cut. The 18 star systems you control are already negotiating separate surrenders with my government. The only question now is whether your royal family survives to lead your people into the future. You threaten us." Prince Minho, the second son, stepped forward with his hand on his sword. "I inform you," Dowan replied. "There is a difference." Emperor Kyunho finally spoke. His voice was weak, broken. "And if we accept these terms, what guarantees do we have that your people will not simply destroy us anyway?" "My word," Dohan said. The room went silent. An Arendorian promise was sealed with blood and ritual. A human promise was just words. But something in Dowan's voice made everyone listen. "I did not come here for genocide," he continued. "I came here to end the practice of slavery. I came here to free my people. I came here to build a peace that will last. If you accept these terms, the Human Confederacy will respect your sovereignty, your culture, and your right to exist." He paused, and his eyes moved across the room. They passed over the emperor. They passed over the princes. And then, for just a moment, they stopped at the ceremonial screen. He could not see through it. Yuna knew this. The screens were designed to hide those behind them completely. But somehow, he seemed to know she was there. "Some of you," he said slowly, "may remember a time when our peoples were not enemies. When humans and Arendorians worked side by side. When friendship was possible." His voice softened, just slightly. "I remember." Yuna's tears fell silently. She covered her mouth with her hand to stop any sound from escaping. He remembered. After 30 years, after everything that had happened, he remembered. The negotiations continued for hours. Terms were argued. Conditions were debated. But Yuna heard none of it. She sat behind the screen with her hand pressed against the wood, watching the boy she had loved become the man who would reshape her world. When the meeting finally ended, Dohan walked toward the doors. But before he left, he spoke one more time. "I will return tonight," he said, "to walk in your gardens. I have heard they are beautiful." It was not a request. It was not a demand. It was an invitation, and Yuna knew exactly what she had to do. The palace gardens at night were a place of quiet magic. Crystal trees grew in neat rows, their branches catching the light of 3 moons and breaking it into 1,000 colors. Flowers that bloomed only in darkness opened their petals and released sweet perfume into the cool air. Small streams ran between the pathways, their water glowing with tiny creatures that lived only in the royal waters. Yuna's mother had planted this garden 2 centuries ago. She had died when Yuna was young, but her work lived on. Every time Yuna walked these paths, she felt close to the woman she barely remembered. Tonight, she walked these paths to meet her past. She had dressed simply. No royal gowns, no jewels, just a plain gray dress that made her look like any common Arendorian woman. She wanted no barriers between herself and the truth. She found him standing beneath the largest crystal tree in the garden. The moonlight caught his face, and she could see his features clearly. He was not the dirty, thin boy she remembered. Years of war had carved him into something harder. But underneath the scars and the weight, she could still see who he used to be. He did not seem surprised when she approached. He simply turned to face her, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression calm. "You remember," he said. It was not a question. Yun. I stopped a few steps away from him. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might break free from her chest. "I thought you died. When the colony was attacked, I searched the records. All human laborers were listed as terminated." Dohan smiled, but there was no joy in it. The records lied. A lot of records from that time lied. It was easier to list us as dead than to admit we had escaped. "How?" The word came out as a whisper. "How did you survive?" He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he began to speak. "When the raiders came, the Arendorian guards ran. They left us behind. 300 human workers, locked in the mining tunnels with no way out." His voice was flat, telling the story like it had happened to someone else. "But the raiders were not there for us. They were there for the equipment. They did not care about human slaves." He turned to look at the crystal tree, its branches spreading above him like frozen lightning. "We waited until they left. Then we broke out of the tunnels. We found a cargo ship that the raiders had abandoned. It was damaged, barely functional. But we made it work. We flew for 3 weeks on half power, eating emergency rations and drinking recycled water." "Where did you go?" "Titan Station." It was the closest human settlement, a moon base where refugees gathered. He paused. "I spent 3 years there. 3 years of hunger and cold and watching people die from sicknesses that could have been cured if anyone cared about us." Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She had grown up in palaces. She had never known true hunger or cold. The difference between her life and his was almost too great to understand. "I joined the military when I was 14, Dohan continued. "I was too young, but they needed bodies. They needed anyone who could hold a weapon. The Arendorian Empire had started a new expansion. Colonies were being raided. Humans were being taken as slaves again." His hands tightened into fists. "I swore I would never let that happen. Not to me. Not to anyone. And you became the ghost of Titan," Yuna said. "I became what my people needed me to become." He finally looked at her again. His eyes were the same quick, clever eyes she remembered, but now they carried 30 years of pain. "I learned that the universe respects only strength. I learned that mercy is a luxury for those who have power. I learned that the only way to protect the people you love is to become something feared. Is that why you destroyed my father's fleet? Because you had to become feared?" Dohan stepped closer to her. They were only an arm's length apart now. She could see every scar on his face, every line of weariness around his eyes. "I destroyed your father's fleet because your empire was killing my people. Because every year, 100,000 humans were captured and sold into slavery. Because children were torn from their mothers and sent to work in mines until they died." His voice rose with old anger. "Because for every kind princess who healed a wounded boy, there were 1,000 masters who worked that boy's parents to death." Yuna flinched. She had known, on some level, what her empire did. She had seen the slaves in the markets. She had heard the whispers about conditions in the mining colonies. But she had never connected it to the boy she had loved. "I am sorry," she said. The words felt small and useless, but they were all she had. "Do not apologize," Dohan said, his voice softening. "You were a child. You are not responsible for the crimes of your ancestors." He reached out and touched her face, his rough fingers gentle against her silver skin. "I never blamed you. I never could." Yuna's tears finally fell. They ran down her cheeks like rain, and she did not try to stop them. "Then why?" she asked. "Why did you do all of this? Why did you become a conqueror? Why did you make yourself into a monster?" because I had to choose between memory and survival. His voice broke just slightly. Because every night for 30 years, I dreamed of a princess with purple eyes who called me friend. And every morning, I woke up to a universe where her people own mine like animals. He dropped his hand from her face and stepped back. I did not want it to be you, Yuna. When I learned that the Emperor of Arendar had a daughter, I prayed to every human god that she would be different from the others, that I would not have to face her across a battlefield, that she would not be the same girl who healed my face in a dark tunnel. I never stopped thinking about you, Yuna said. I never forgot. When they told me you were dead, I cried for weeks. I kept the memory of you like a secret treasure, hidden from everyone. Doan laughed. It was a broken sound, more sad than happy. We are a tragic story. The princess and the slave. The conqueror and the conquered. 30 years, and we end up here, in your mother's garden, with an empire lying in ruins between us. It does not have to be tragic. Yuna stepped forward and took his hands in hers. His skin was warm against her cool fingers. You said you came here for peace. You said you wanted to build something that would last. Let me help you. Your people will call you a traitor. Let them. Your father will never forgive you. He will learn. Dawan looked at her with something like wonder. You are still the same girl. After everything, you are still the girl who broke the rules to save a human boy. And you are still the boy who pushed me out of the way of falling metal. Yuna squeezed his hands. We saved each other once. We can do it again. Not just for us, but for everyone. For a long moment, Dohan did not speak. He simply looked at her, his quick eyes searching her face for any sign of doubt or deception. He had learned to trust no one. He had built walls around his heart to survive, but some walls were meant to fall. I have a meeting with your father tomorrow, he said finally, to finalize the treaty terms. I will be there, not behind the screen. At the table, the court will not allow it. Yuna smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was a real smile. The court does not decide what I do. I am the Princess of Arendar, and I have decided to build a new future. Dawan smiled back. It transformed his face, making him look younger, lighter. For just a moment, he was the boy from the maintenance tunnels again, full of dreams and hope. Then I will see you tomorrow. Princess, call me Yuna. She held onto his hands a moment longer, not wanting to let go. Like you used to, Yuna. He said her name like a prayer. Until tomorrow. He walked away through the crystal trees, and Yuna watched him go. The 3 moons shone down on the garden, and for the first time since the war began, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The throne room fell silent when Yuna walked in. She was not behind the ceremonial screens. She was not hidden away like a decoration. She walked through the main doors, past the rows of advisors and nobles, and took a seat at the negotiating table directly across from Admiral Park Do-hwan. Her father stared at her with cold fury. Her brothers looked ready to drag her from the room by force. The old lords whispered behind their hands, their faces showing shock and disapproval. Yuna ignored them all. Princess, Lord Taiho said carefully, this is highly unusual. Perhaps you would be more comfortable observing from the traditional position. The traditional position is a cage, Yuna replied. Her voice was calm but firm. I am done being caged. I am here to participate in the future of my people. She looked at Do-hwan. His face showed nothing, but his eyes were warm. I have no objection, he said. The Human Confederacy welcomes Princess Yuna to these negotiations. Emperor Kyunho said nothing. He simply sank deeper into his throne, as if the weight of his defeat had grown even heavier. He had not spoken much since the surrender. His spirit seemed to have left along with his fleet that the negotiations began. They argued over every detail. the exact number of prisoners to be released, the timeline for closing the slave markets, the boundaries of the demilitarized zone. Each point became a battle, with the Arendorian lords fighting to keep what little pride they had left. Yuna watched and learned. She saw how Doan negotiated. He never raised his voice. He never made threats. He simply presented facts and let them speak for themselves. When the lords grew angry, he remained patient. When they tried to manipulate, he saw through their tricks. He was good at this. Better than any of her father's advisors. But she was good at it too. The timeline you propose is impossible, Lord Minjay said. He was the Minister of Commerce, a fat old man who had grown rich from the slave trade. We cannot close all markets within 6 months. The economic damage would be catastrophic. Then propose an alternative, Doan said. Lord Minjay smiled smugly. 3 years, minimum, with compensation for lost revenue. Doan opened his mouth to respond, but Yuna spoke first. 1 year, she said. With no compensation. Every head in the room turned to her. Lord Minjay's face turned red with anger. Princess, with respect, you do not understand the complexities of... I understand that you have made yourself wealthy by selling human beings. Yuna's voice was ice. I understand that every month those markets remain open, families are destroyed. I understand that my people's economy should not be built on the suffering of others. She turned to Doan. 1 year is reasonable. It gives time for adjustment while showing good faith. If Lord Minjay cannot manage this, perhaps we need a new Minister of Commerce. Lord Minjay sputtered with rage, but he could not argue with the princess in front of the human delegation. He fell silent, his face burning with humiliation. Doan nodded slowly. 1 year is acceptable. The negotiations continued, and Yuna found her voice. She suggested compromises that neither side had considered. She pointed out flaws in both Arendorian and human proposals. She asked questions that cut through political games and reached the heart of issues. By the end of the first day, even her brothers were listening to her with grudging respect. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Yuna's life. The court called her a traitor openly now. Old friends stopped speaking to her. Her brothers refused to share meals with her. Even the servants looked at her differently, some with anger, others with something that might have been hope. But she did not stop. Every day, she sat at the negotiating table. Every night, she met Doan in the gardens. They talked about the treaty, about their peoples, about the future they were trying to build. And slowly, something began to change. The first slave market closed 3 months after the negotiations began. Yuna was there to watch. Human prisoners walked out of their cages and into freedom, their eyes full of confusion and hope. Many of them had never known anything but chains. They did not know how to be free. This is harder than conquering, Doan said. He stood beside her, watching the former slaves take their first free steps. War is simple. You have an enemy. You fight. You win or lose. But this is complicated. Complicated is not the same as impossible, Yuna said. She reached out and took his hand. They had done this many times now, in private. But this was the first time she did it in public, in front of humans and Arendorians alike. The whispers grew louder. They will hate you for this, Doan said quietly. Your people will never accept us. Some will not, Yuna agreed. But others will. Change does not happen in a day. It happens over years, over generations. We are planting seeds, and if those seeds never grow? Yuna squeezed his hand. Then at least we tried. 6 months into the negotiations, the first assassination attempt came. Yuna was walking through the palace corridors when the attacker struck. He was a young Arendorian noble, his eyes wild with hatred. He had a knife, and he knew how to use it. But Yuna had been learning. Do-hwan had insisted on teaching her basic combat skills. He said that anyone who challenged an empire needed to know how to defend herself. She had thought it was unnecessary. She was wrong. She blocked the first strike and twisted away from the second. The attacker was stronger than her, but she was faster. She grabbed a decorative vase from a nearby table and smashed it across his face. He went down, blood streaming from his nose. Palace guards arrived moments later. They dragged the attacker away, and he screamed insults at Yuna the entire time. Traitor! Human lover! You have betrayed everything our ancestors built. Yuna said nothing. She simply watched him go, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline. That night, Do-hwan found her in the gardens. She was sitting beneath a crystal tree, her knees pulled up to her chest. I heard what happened, he said. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Are you hurt? No, just shaken. She laughed weakly. I never thought my own people would try to kill me. They see you as the face of change. And change is terrifying. Is that how your people saw you? When you first started fighting? Do-hwan was quiet for a moment. At first, they saw me as a fool. A young boy who did not understand how the universe worked. They told me that humans could not defeat Arendorians. That we were meant to serve. His voice hardened. I proved them wrong. And now? How do they see you now? Now they see me as a hero. He shook his head. I am not a hero. I am just a man who refused to accept the world as it was. Yuna turned to look at him. In the moonlight, his scars seemed to glow like silver lines drawn on his skin. You are a hero to me, she said. You have always been a hero to me. Even when you were just a dirty boy in a maintenance tunnel. Do-hwan smiled. It was a real smile, rare and precious. And you have always been a princess to me. Even when you were crying in a cargo bay. I was not crying. I was having strong emotions. You were definitely crying. Shut up. They laughed together, and for a moment, the weight of everything they were carrying seemed lighter. There will be more attempts, Do-hwan said finally. From both sides. Hardliners who cannot accept peace. Extremists who want war forever. I know. Are you ready for that? Yuna thought about the question seriously. She thought about the hatred in the attacker's eyes. She thought about the whispers and the isolation. She thought about everything she had lost and everything she still stood to lose. Then she thought about the slaves walking free. She thought about the children who would never be taken from their parents. She thought about the future they were building, one painful day at a time. Yes, she said. I am ready. Do-hwan took her hand and held it tight. Then we continue. Together. Together. Above them, the 3 moons crossed the sky, and the crystal trees glittered like frozen hope. 5 years passed like water flowing through open hands. The Arendor Empire was no more. In its place stood the Arendorian Republic, a new government built on foundations that had never existed before. Humans and Arendorians served in the same councils. Laws protected all citizens equally. The slave markets were gone, replaced by free labor exchanges where workers chose their own employers. It was not perfect. Nothing ever was. Old hatreds still burned in dark corners. Extremists on both sides still called for blood. But compared to what had come before, it was a miracle. Princess Yuna stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, humanity's first joint exploration vessel. Through the massive windows, she watched the stars spread out before her like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there were worlds no one had ever seen. Mysteries waiting to be discovered. Futures waiting to be written. You look happy, Do-hwan said. He walked up beside her, his footsteps soft on the metal floor. He no longer wore military uniforms. His official title now was Ambassador Park Do-hwan, chief diplomatic officer of the Human Confederacy. But to the crew of the New Dawn, he was simply the Admiral. Some titles never went away. "I am happy," Una said. "I never thought I would stand here, on a ship crewed by both our peoples, heading into the unknown together. 30 years ago, I did not think I would stand anywhere." Dohan smiled, and the scars on his face shifted like old memories. "I thought I would die in a mine on some forgotten colony. And instead you conquered an empire. And instead I found something worth more than conquest." He took her hand. This was no longer a secret. The whole galaxy knew about the human admiral and the Arendorian princess. Some called it a scandal. Others called it a symbol. Una did not care what they called it. Behind them, the bridge hummed with activity. Human officers worked alongside Arendorian ones, their voices mixing into a chorus of purpose. Lieutenant Sujin, a young human woman, called out navigation coordinates. Commander Taiwu, an Arendorian with silver scales and sharp eyes, confirmed the jump calculations. They worked together like they had been doing it for years, because they had been. The crew of the New Dawn had trained together for 18 months. They had learned each other's languages, customs, and weaknesses. They had fought and argued and laughed together. By the time the ship launched, they were not humans and Arendorians anymore. They were crew. "Admiral," Lieutenant Sujin said, "we are approaching the jump point. Faster than light travel ready on your command." Dohan looked at Una. "Care to give the order, Ambassador?" Una smiled at the title. She had earned it through years of work, building bridges between worlds that had once been at war. It was a simple word, but it carried the weight of everything she had sacrificed. "Take us in," she said. The ship trembled slightly as the engines powered up. Outside the windows, the stars began to stretch and blur. Then, with a flash of light that seemed to come from everywhere at once, the New Dawn jumped. They emerged in a new system. A yellow sun burned at its center, surrounded by 7 planets that had never been mapped. Sensors immediately began gathering data, sending streams of information to the science stations. "Multiple habitable worlds detected," Commander Taiwu reported. "At least 2 show signs of liquid water. One has atmospheric conditions suitable for both human and Arendorian life." "Life signs?" Dohan asked. "None that we can detect. But there are unusual energy readings on the 3rd planet. Artificial structures, possibly." Una felt her heart beat faster. The galaxy was full of mysteries. Some of them might be dangerous. But danger was no longer a reason to hide. "Set course for the 3rd planet," she said. "Let us see what we find." The ship turned and began its journey deeper into the unknown system. Una watched the stars through the window, thinking about everything that had brought her here. She thought about the mining colony and the scared little princess crying in a cargo bay. She thought about the boy who had sat beside her and taught her human words when speaking to her could have cost him his life. She thought about the 30 years of separation, the war, the conquest, and the impossible reunion. She thought about the garden where they had found each other again, standing under crystal trees planted by her long-dead mother. "Do you remember what you told me?" Dohan asked. His voice was soft, meant only for her. "In the maintenance tunnel, after I was hurt?" Una smiled at the memory. "I told you that someday you would be important, that the stars themselves would know your name. I thought you were just trying to make a scared kid feel better. I was." She turned to face him fully. "I was also right." He laughed. It was a sound she had heard more often in the past 5 years than in the 30 before. The weight he carried had not disappeared, but it had grown lighter. They had both learned that burdens were easier to bear when shared. "And what about you, Princess?" he asked. "The histories will remember you as the one who chose peace when war would have been easier. Let them remember what they wish." Yuna looked out at the stars again, endless and waiting. I know the truth. I am simply a girl who never stopped believing in her friend. Dawan took her hand as the ship sailed through the void, carrying them toward whatever mysteries awaited behind them. Two civilizations watched with held breath. The new dawn was more than a ship. It was a promise. A demonstration that enemies could become allies, that hatred could give way to hope, that the universe was big enough for everyone. The journey would not be easy. There would be dangers ahead, challenges that neither humans nor Arendorians could predict. But for the first time in centuries, they would face those challenges together. On the third planet, the mysterious structures waited in silence. They had stood for thousands of years, built by a civilization that no longer existed. They held secrets that would change everything the crew of the New Dawn thought they knew about the galaxy. But that was a story for another time. Right now, in this moment, what mattered was the ship and its crew. What mattered was the human hand holding the Arendorian one. What mattered was the future stretching out before them, unlimited and full of possibility. We should send a message back to the fleet, Lieutenant Sujin said. Let them know we arrived safely. Dawan nodded. What should we tell them? Yuna thought for a moment. Then she smiled. Tell them, she said, that the stars are waiting. And we are ready. The message went out at the speed of light, crossing the vast distances between systems. It reached human colonies and Arendorian worlds alike. It was heard in council chambers and living rooms, in military bases and civilian cafes. And everywhere it was heard. People looked up at the sky. The universe was big and dark and full of unknown things. But it was also full of wonder, full of possibility, full of stories waiting to be written. This was just the beginning. Yuna stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, her hand in Dawan's, watching the unknown world grow larger in the windows. She thought about everything they had overcome, and everything that still lay ahead. 30 years of war, and silence had finally found its end. And in the space between their interlocked fingers, a new chapter was just beginning. The stars had never looked so bright.